Everything on her Instagram looked perfect. Expensive cars in the background, parties with friends, happy photos with her youngest in her arms. Anastasia Akhmetova, 24 years old, ran a blog under the nickname Asya Ogonyok, and her subscribers saw exactly what she wanted them to see: the glamorous life of a young mother from Volgograd. Then, on November 17th, 2023, a completely different video appeared on the Telegram channel of public activist Vitaly Borodin. Without warning, without context, just a phone recording. In it, that same Anastasia is pressing a pillow against the face of a child who is only 7 months old. Once, twice, a third time, the baby looks about 7 months old. She cannot resist, only jerking her small hands. The woman films the scene herself, not hiding, not turning the camera away. On the contrary, she demonstrates and comments on it all with profanity. Borodin is the head of the Federal Project for Security and Anti-Corruption, and he has tens of thousands of followers. Within an hour, the clip had spread through Volgograd social media groups. By evening, federal media outlets were writing about it. The Dzerzhinsky District Prosecutor's Office began an investigation that same day, and the police established her identity and recorded a report. But there were no answers yet, only questions. To whom was she sending this video? Why did she film it exactly like that, demonstratively, with her face in the frame? And why did the recording look clearly outdated? The quality, the lighting, the clothes on the woman, everything pointed to summer. Yet, it was November. As it would later turn out, the video was filmed about 5 months before publication. All this time, it was being kept somewhere. Someone was holding on to it. And for some reason, they decided to post it only now. Journalists opened her pages that same day. Instagram, VKontakte, TikTok. It was the same everywhere. Luxury cars, designer clothes, restaurants, clubs, resorts. Explicit photos in lingerie, hundreds of posts, and in almost every one, she poses as if shooting for a glossy magazine. An older son appeared in a few photos. In a couple of frames, the one who had just been born. Everything else was glamour, parties, and the high life. But while some were studying her feed, something else began to surface online. First, a photo with Morgenstern, the very rapper recognized as a foreign agent who had left the country. They are together in the picture. But that was only the beginning. Telegram channels began digging further and found a video, an intimate one, with him. According to media reports, Akhmetova sold this recording online, and her husband, the same one to whom she later sent the clips with the pillow, found out about the existence of the video from friends. They sent him a link while he was serving in the Special Military Operation, SVO. She gave birth 9 months after the alleged intimacy with the rapper. Who the father is remains a question that never received an official answer. But rumors started immediately, and they explained a lot. Why the husband demanded an investigation, why the pillow video appeared at all, and why this entire conflict went far beyond the family. Now, while journalists were scrolling through her feed, another detail emerged. Her older son was being raised by his grandmother, and guardianship had been officially processed. The youngest was also left with relatives. Akhmatova herself, judging by the geolocations in her posts, was rarely home. This raised an obvious question. Where did an unemployed mother of two get the money for such a lifestyle? The answer was found on websites that are usually not indexed by search engines. On specialized sites, those that do not appear in regular search results, journalists found her profile. Photos, a description of services, contact information. There she called herself by a different name, Avgustina. Hi, my name is Avgustina. I am open body and soul to new acquaintances. If you are reading this now, it means you are the one I would like to spend my evening and the following night with. And that wasn't the only platform. Media wrote about virtual sex for money and paid videos in private channels. All of this existed in parallel with the glamorous life on Instagram, in parallel with the role of a mother of two. Later, in court, Akhmatova would say that the photos were stolen. She had once modeled for a lingerie advertisement. The photos remained with the photographers, and someone could have created a fake account in her name. She did not deny that it was her in the photos, but she did not admit to being an escort. The court did not accept this explanation. During the arguments, the Dzerzhinsky District Administration stated bluntly, Akhmatova leads an immoral lifestyle. And these were not conjectures. They were case materials. It is important to understand, all of this was not happening in the distant past. It was happening in the summer of 2023, during the very months when the pillow video was filmed, during the very months when her husband was on the front lines and had no idea what his wife was doing. He found out later, not about the profiles, about something else. His friends sent him the video, straight to his phone, without warning. Just a link and a short message. He opened it. On the screen was his wife and a rapper known by the whole country. As it would later turn out, the clip had been filmed about a year and a half before that moment. According to media reports, Morgenstern had used Akhmatova's services. She was one of those he found through Escort platforms. She apparently filmed the video herself. The husband knew nothing about the profiles, her business, or this connection. He was on the front lines. She was in Volgograd with their youngest daughter, the one whose paternity became the subject of rumors. The question of paternity hung in the air. The Telegram channel MASH wrote about it directly, not holding back in its phrasing. Later, the topic was picked up by Borodin. He released an entire investigative film where he suggested that she might not be the husband's child. Morgenstern himself said nothing. Not then, not later. De jure, he has nothing to do with this story. The birth certificate bears the name of another man. The very man who, at that moment, was thousands of kilometers away, staring at a phone screen. He couldn't return. He couldn't take her away. He couldn't do anything physically. but he found a way to act. Vitaly Borodin is a man whose name regularly appears in the news alongside the names of celebrities. A former criminal investigation operative, then a fighter against illegal substances, then a public activist. In 2017, he created the Federal Project for Security and Anti-Corruption, an organization that files complaints with the Prosecutor General's office. Against whom? Against everyone. Akhedjakova. He demanded a treason case. Pugacheva. He initiated her recognition as a foreign agent. Bilan. He asked for substance testing after a scandalous concert. Kirkorov. He demanded he be stripped of his People's Artist title. Dozens of appeals, dozens of investigations. He knows how the system works and knows how to set it in motion. And it was to him that Akhmedova's husband turned. According to Borodin, the serviceman reached out himself. He told the story, showed the video, and explained that he had already turned to Child Protective Services and the police. But there was no reaction. Nothing was moving, and he was thousands of kilometers away and could not intervene personally. Borodin agreed to help. On November 17th, he posted the video on his Telegram channel, and on the same day, he sent an appeal to the Prosecutor General's office. The machine began to turn. A prosecutor's investigation, the initiation of a criminal case, and the removal of the youngest child by guardianship authorities. Now, the husband had been holding onto the video since June. 5 months. Why didn't he publish it sooner? Why wait until November? This question remained unanswered, but the result was achieved. She was taken to a social center. The mother was left alone, under investigation, without her rights, facing a criminal case. It seemed the story was over. But Borodin was not the only one the husband turned to. There was another person, Elizaveta Bargaeva, the ex-wife of millionaire blogger Ruslan Bargaev, a blogger and model herself. She had once worked for Channel 1. She had an audience. She had a voice. And she lived in Volgograd. The serviceman wrote to her in a messenger. He told her what was happening, that his wife was using substances, that she was exerting influence on the youngest, that he was at the front and could do nothing. He asked her to tell her subscribers about it. Maybe that way the situation could be moved forward. Bargaeva agreed to help, but there was a detail that the serviceman likely did not know. Akhmedova and Bargaeva were acquainted. Moreover, they had once been friends, and then had a falling out. According to Elizaveta, while she was still married, Akhmedova had leaked information to Ruslan, reporting where Liza was, who she was meeting, and what she was wearing. After the divorce, the relationship was completely ruined, and now Akhmetova found out that her husband was communicating with her former friend, exactly what she thought is unknown. Jealousy, fear of exposure, a desire to take revenge on both at once. One way or another, she decided to act. And she brought a friend along, not just any friend. Anastasia Brudnaya, a relative of a man whose name is known in Volgograd by anyone who remembers the 90s. Anastasia Brudnaya a surname known in Volgograd. Her father is Vitaly Brudny. In 2019, he was sentenced to 10 years in a maximum security colony. Attempted infliction of grievous bodily harm, illegal manufacture of explosive devices, and storage and transportation of firearms. It was a high-profile story. In 2014, Brudny decided to avenge his older brother Sergei, whose end had come in the city center near a cafe on the embankment. He held kickboxer Vladimir Patashkin, a European champion, responsible. He ordered a neutralization. He chose an unusual method, a bomb attached to a radio-controlled helicopter. The device failed to work. The perpetrator was detained and pointed to the person who ordered it. As it would later turn out, Patashkin had nothing to do with Sergei Brudny's death at all. Vitaly Brudny still calls himself a businessman and denies ties to the underworld. The court did not agree with him, and now his relative was beside Akhmatova. The two Anastasias became inseparable. Both young, both from Volgograd, both, judging by social media, accustomed to a certain lifestyle, and both developed a common problem: Elizaveta Bargaeva. According to Bargaeva, the harassment did not start immediately. First, there were calls, threats, stalking. Someone was testing whether the victim was prepared to endure it. She was not prepared, but the two Anastasias were not going to back down either. First came the flowers, a courier delivery, 2 red carnations tied with a black ribbon. On the ribbon was the inscription, "Eternal Memory." Bargaeva understood everything immediately. This was not a threat. It was a promise. A few hours later, a knock at the door. She looked through the peephole. A neighbor, a guy from the next apartment, was standing on the landing. She opened it. Behind him stood the two Anastasias, with a bat, with a bottle of urine. They used him as bait. They had persuaded him to knock, saying something about an urgent matter. The door opened, and it began. Akhmatova struck with the bat immediately. Bargaeva screamed. The neighbors heard the screams, ran out, intervened, and pushed the attackers away. Elizaveta had already sustained her first injuries, but she remained on her feet. The two Anastasias retreated, but as they left, they promised to return with a knife, with a gun, or with a traumatic pistol. Bargaeva closed the door. Her pajamas were torn, her hands were shaking. It was getting dark outside. The police? A report? Protection? None of that would work fast enough. She understood this. They did too. The next day, Bargaeva was returning home. Evening, the parking lot near the house on Rayonskaya Street. She got out of the car, and immediately 2 people jumped out of the darkness. Akhmatova and Brudnaya. They opened the doors and didn't let her leave. The first strike, a taser to the stomach. Bargaeva lost consciousness and fell, and they continued. The bat, hands, feet, to the head, to the whole body. While she lay unconscious, they beat her. A friend of Bargaeva's, who was nearby, barely managed to get her to the apartment. Nausea, dizziness, memory lapses. On October 21st, Elizaveta was taken to Volgograd Hospital number 25. The diagnosis, a concussion and soft tissue contusions. She wrote a statement. She described everything: the stalking, the carnations, the hallway, the parking lot. She gave the names. She pointed to the surveillance camera footage and the witnesses, and nothing happened. The police began an investigation, but a criminal case was not initiated. Akhmetova was questioned. She admitted to a scuffle, but denied anything serious. Brudnaya was processed merely as a witness, not as a suspect, as a witness. So, Bargaeva lay in the hospital with a traumatic brain injury, while the person who, according to her, beat her with a bat was giving testimony as an eyewitness. On November 16th, Vitaly Borodin flew to Volgograd personally, and it was not just a visit, it was a demonstration. The man who had initiated investigations against Pugacheva and Akhechikova, who for years had triggered mechanisms that no one wanted to touch, had now come to sort out the case of a Volgograd blogger. And the local police understood perfectly well what that meant. Borodin met with Bargaeva, listened to the whole story from beginning to end, and then went to her home to talk to the concierge, study the surveillance footage, and record who entered the hallway, who left, at what time, and with what in their hands. And the cameras captured a lot. A video of the attack appeared in which Akhmetova is holding Bargaeva by the hair while she screams and asks to be let go as witnesses stand nearby. And at one point, around the 5th second of the recording, an object flies to the side. A knife that fell from Akhmetova's hand during the fight. From that moment, everything changed. A knife is no longer a domestic conflict or a scuffle between acquaintances. A knife means preparation. It means intent. It is a completely different criminal charge. Borodin wrote directly on his Telegram channel, "No one will escape responsibility. Everything will be according to the law." Almost immediately after that, the investigative department of the Investigative Committee for the Volgograd region initiated the transfer of the materials from the police to its own jurisdiction. The case of improper treatment of the youngest child, the investigation materials regarding the attacks on Bargaeva, all of it was now going through the investigative committee. The pressure worked, and the machine that hadn't moved for an entire month finally started. On January 19th, 2024, the session that many had been waiting for began at the Dzerzhinsky District Court of Volgograd. The prosecutor's office and the district administration demanded that Anastasia Akhmetova be stripped of her parental rights. By this point, the youngest had already been in a social center for several months, and now the court had to decide whether she would return to her mother or not. Akhmetova did not attend the session. Her lawyer explained that his client had fallen ill. On Epiphany, she had bathed in an ice hole at the Angarsky Pond and caught a cold. It was serious, She could not appear. However, that same day, Akhmetova posted a story from the gym, and in the evening, she was seen at a nightclub. The prosecutor's office presented the materials: the pillow video, data about her lifestyle, and the findings of the guardianship authorities. A representative for the father, the serviceman, stated that the child experienced fear during the incidents, but could not express it due to her age, and that there was no certainty that it was an isolated incident. Akhmetova's lawyer objected. Yes, his client has things to work on, but in his opinion, there were no direct grounds for the termination of rights. The court retired for deliberation, and it issued a decision to deny the claim to Anastasia Akhmetova, a warning. She was given a second chance. The prosecutor's office reacted immediately and stated that the decision would be appealed. But at that moment, in January 2024, the woman who had restricted the breathing of her youngest child on camera formally remained a mother. May 22, 2024. Volgograd Regional Court, an appeal against the decision of the district court, which 4 months earlier had refused to terminate parental rights. Akhmetova's lawyer repeated his position. His client is not on any oversight registers. She provides for the child, and she cares for her. In his opinion, there are no grounds for the termination of rights. Then a representative of the Dzerzhinsky District Administration took the floor. She voiced a fact that had not been mentioned publicly before. The youngest child had suffered hypoxia during birth, oxygen deprivation, a condition that can lead to brain damage, a condition in which she needs special care, attention, and constant observation. The mother knew about this diagnosis, and she still restricted her breathing with a pillow. The administration representative added another detail. Akhmetova had been repeatedly seen driving while intoxicated. The court recorded the following. From June to November 2023, the defendant led an immoral lifestyle, effectively failed to appear at home, did not look after the youngest child, abused alcohol, and did not work. The living conditions were provided by the grandmother and great-grandmother. They were the ones who had cared for the child all that time. As it would later turn out, the family was already on the register due to the improper fulfillment of duties regarding the older son, the same one who had long been living with his grandmother. By this time, Akhmetova had changed her surname and was now registered as Miskaladze. She had likely married. The judge retired to the deliberation room. The judge returned from the deliberation room, and the room froze in anticipation. The decision was as follows: to satisfy the appeal of the prosecutor's office and to completely overturn the decision of the Dzerzhinsky District Court, to strip Anastasia Akhmetova, now Miskaladze, of her parental rights regarding the youngest child, and to collect a quarter of her income for child support until the child reaches adulthood. Until that moment, she had pleaded for the child to be returned from the social institution, saying that she had improved herself, that she had realized everything, and that her children were all she had in life. The court listened to these words and did not believe a single one of them. The lawyer immediately stated that the decision would be appealed in a court of cassation. But the most telling thing happened in the next second. Immediately after the announcement of the decision, Akhmatova rushed out of the courtroom, and as she walked, threw a phrase into the void, with a threat to burn someone's house down. To whom exactly it was addressed remained unclear. Later, she did indeed appeal to the cassation court with a request to restore her parental rights. The cassation court reviewed the materials and upheld the decision. The youngest child remained in the social institution. But that was not the end of the story, because the criminal case regarding the fact of improper treatment had not even been considered yet. In court, the prosecutor asked a direct question. Why did she do it? And Akhmatova, looking into the room, began to explain. It was a cry of despair. My husband left me with a small child and a loan of almost 1,000,000 rubles. He entered into a relationship with my former best friend. With this video, I wanted to show him, look what you've driven me to. She called it a message. And the instrument of this message was a 7-month-old with hypoxia, who could neither protect herself nor scream for help. The logic that Akhmatova tried to build before the court looked like this. Her husband cheated. She suffered. She wanted to show him her state of mind. And for this, she chose a method that was impossible to ignore. However, in the case materials, there was another detail that changed the picture. She sent the video to her husband not just as a demonstration of her despair, but with a specific demand for money. Not, look what you've driven me to, but give me money. And all this while the husband was in the SVO, thousands of kilometers away, without the possibility of coming, intervening, or taking her away. The cry of despair version and the extortion version were not mutually exclusive, but together they cast doubt on the main thing. Was she a victim of circumstances, or did she calculatingly use her child as leverage against her husband? The court heard both versions, recorded the testimony, and moved on. But there was another version that never received further development. The publication novosti-volgograd.ru, citing a source in law enforcement, reported that the video in which Akhmatova restricts a child's breathing with a pillow and snorts a white powder might have appeared due to pressure. She may have been manipulated from the outside. The logic was as follows: communication on Escort websites, meetings that transitioned from the virtual plane to reality, and people who could have gathered compromising material on her to later use as leverage. In other words, it is possible she did not film these videos for her husband at all. Perhaps someone forced her to do it, but the version remained just that, a version. Akhmatova never officially declared any pressure. She did not name names, did not file statements, and did not ask for an investigation. If there was any influence, she chose to remain silent. The court did not examine this line of inquiry. The prosecutor's office did not raise it. The defense did not utilize it. In the case files, only 2 explanations remained: a cry of despair over her husband's infidelity and the extortion of money. Both came from her own words and actions, and the version of external pressure was left hanging in the air, neither confirmed nor refuted, simply uninvestigated. On August 8th, 2024, in the courtroom of the Justice of the Peace for Judicial District number 137 of the Dzerzhinsky District of Volgograd, the verdict was read. Anastasia Miskaladze, née Akhmetova, was found guilty under 2 articles of the Criminal Code of the Russian Federation. The first, failure to fulfill parental duties, combined with improper treatment. Article 156. The second, threat of causing grievous harm. Article 119, Part 1. The court confirmed the circumstances established previously in the civil process. Failure to fulfill parental duties in the period from June to November 2023, an immoral lifestyle, and shifting the care of the youngest child onto relatives. In June 2023, she applied physical force, restricting the child's breathing with a pillow and recording it on video. Regarding the second episode, the court established that the defendant threatened Elizaveta Bargaeva and applied physical force to her. The total sentence for the crimes: 380 hours of compulsory labor, not imprisonment, not a suspended sentence, not a fine. Labor. Akhmetova listened to the verdict, did not admit guilt, and stated that she categorically disagreed with the court's decision. She immediately announced that she would be filing an appeal. At some point, photos of a completely different nature appeared on her social media. Akhmetova posed with her head covered in a scarf and announced to her followers that she had converted to Islam. "I am a Muslim. For some time I went about covered. I will say this: it was the best and purest time of my life." Later, the scarf disappeared from the photos, but the statement about accepting the faith remained on her profile. And so, parallel to these religious searches, a completely different story was unfolding. The story of the compulsory labor assigned to her by the court. The first day of work, according to her own words, lasted only a few minutes. Then began illnesses, medical certificates, postponements, and endless delays. She spoke of a cold allergy, presented documents, and asked to be assigned to work at the hospital where her mother works. In the end, work was assigned to her at the Volgograd Center for Epidemiology. In winter, she cleaned the premises. In summer, the territory around the building. It was hard and unfamiliar, but I managed, she later wrote on social media. By the time she wrote that, the situation had already changed again, because in October 2024, she was stopped again by traffic police, behind the wheel, without a license, in a state of intoxication. October 28, 2024, Universitetsky Avenue, Sovietsky District, of Volgograd, opposite house number 23. Akhmedova is behind the wheel of a relative's car, an Omoda C5. She does not have a driver's license and never has, but she drives anyway. She loses control and crashes into a parked Skoda Octavia. The police arrive at the scene, and the officers immediately record signs of intoxication in the driver. They offer her a medical examination. She refuses, and it is important to understand this was not her first such violation. Previously, she had already been held administratively liable under the same article, operating a vehicle while intoxicated by a person who does not have the right to drive. Now, after a repeat violation, a criminal case is initiated under Article 264.1. The case reaches the Sovietsky District Court in January 2025. The first hearing is scheduled for February 7th, but it is postponed. The next, for the 21st. In court, Akhmedova again denies her guilt and asks a question that apparently seems convincing to her. And why do you assume I was even behind the wheel? Then she builds her logic. Since she never had a driver's license, she could not have violated a ban on driving. The logic, of course, did not work. The court finds her guilty and imposes a sentence: 250 hours of compulsory labor, plus the deprivation of the right to operate vehicles for 2 years. The car cannot be seized. It is on credit, pledged to the bank. So now, 250 hours were added to the 380 hours for improper treatment. In total, more than 600 hours of compulsory labor. By September 2025, according to calculations, she will have worked it all off and will formally be clean before the law. But the question we asked at the very beginning remains unanswered. Why? Why did she do it? So, 4 versions, and not one of them fully closes the question. Version 1, her own, a cry of despair. Her husband left her, went back to a former friend, and left her with a debt of nearly 1 million rubles. The video, according to her, was a message: "Look what you've driven me to." But if it truly was a cry of despair, why was the video accompanied by a demand for money? Why send it to a husband at the SVO with the clear expectation of receiving a transfer? Version 2, the one the prosecution was built on: extortion, manipulation, using the youngest child as a tool of pressure on a serviceman. A cold calculation that he would not be able to stand it and would pay just to make it stop. But if it is a calculation, why post the video publicly later? Why destroy your own reputation and burn all bridges behind you? Someone engaged in extortion does not act that way. Version 3, the one that surfaced with reference to law enforcement sources. Pressure, but not by her, against her. An escort profile, real meetings, someone gathered dirt and used it as leverage. Perhaps the video was not filmed for the husband at all, but under outside influence. But if she truly was being pressured, why did she never declare it? She didn't name names, didn't file a complaint, didn't ask for protection. The court didn't even consider this version because there was not a single basis for it. And version 4, the most obvious: alcohol, likely substances, loss of control, an immoral lifestyle. Simply a person who stopped distinguishing the boundaries of the permissible. But if it is simply degradation, why this way? Why systematically? Why on camera? Demonstratively, with her face in the frame, and not in a hidden mode, as usually happens. And most importantly, why the child who had hypoxia? She knew the diagnosis. She knew there was oxygen starvation during birth. She knew it could mean brain damage. She knew that any pressure on the child's breathing was critically dangerous. And still, she covered the child's face with a pillow. None of the versions explain this. Not the cry of despair, not the cold calculation, not the external pressure, nor the loss of control. Something doesn't add up, but there is one detail that everyone seems to have missed. A detail that ties everything together. Let's go back to the beginning and try to put it all together. June 2023. She films the video, covers the face with a pillow, and sends the recording to her husband at the SVO with a demand for money. And then, for 5 months, the husband is silent. In November, the leak occurs and the video becomes public. But she didn't post it. He did. Through Borodin. And here the question arises. Why does a man who was silent for 5 months suddenly decide to make this public? Most likely because he realized there was no other way to stop it. As long as the video remained between them, it worked. She held him on the hook, and he paid, or kept silent, or both at the same time. When he brought it out into the open, the hook stopped working. But he also lost control over the situation. It was no longer up to them. So, most likely, the following was happening. Akhmatova said in court, "Look what you've driven me to." She called the video a message, explained it as a cry of despair, revenge for infidelity. But messages are not sent with demands for money, and cries of despair are not recorded systematically, time after time, on camera. Judging by the case materials, it was not a single video and not a spontaneous breakdown. She knew there was a diagnosis of hypoxia. She knew that any pressure on breathing was dangerous. And still, she covered the face with a pillow, on camera, demonstratively, so there would be something to show. This is not madness. Madness does not film itself on video for subsequent use. This was, in all likelihood, a tool. Leverage. A way of saying, try to leave and see what happens. When her double life began to be exposed, the Escort profile, the video with Morgenstern being away from home for months, she was losing ground. The husband could demand a divorce, could take the youngest children through the court. She had one trump card left, the most terrifying possible, and she used it. This is not a story about a crazy mother. This is a story about how the smallest one becomes a hostage in a war between parents. About how a person, driven into a corner by their own lies, turns the most defenseless being into a weapon. And now it becomes clear why the video was kept for 5 months without movement. Why she attacked Bargaeva so fiercely. She threatened her control over the situation. Why she never admitted guilt in court. For her, it was not the extreme gravity of her actions, but a negotiating position. The youngest child is now in a social institution. Perhaps in time, she will be handed over to her father. Akhmedova has worked her hours and considers herself clean before the law. But the question the viewer is left with is not about her. It is about the system, about how a mother can use the smallest child as leverage and receive 380 hours of labor for it, about how many such stories we do not see because they do not end up on Telegram channels, about what happens behind closed doors, while on social media there are expensive cars, parties, and a happy mom. Asya Ogonyok has gone out, but the smoke from this fire will linger over Volgograd for a long time.